I also do believe that this is after death communication, that our ancestors have passed on and they have gems of wisdom that they want to make sure stay alive in our ancestral lines through us.
Keep watching to learn more. Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Emmy Vadnais, co-host with Jeffrey Mishlove. Our topic today is talking to your wise and well ancestors with my guest, Tamala Floyd, who is a psychotherapist, consultant, and speaker. She is the first Black lead trainer with the Internal Family Systems Institute. She taught at the University of Phoenix and the University of Southern California in human services and social work. Her work focuses on women's trauma, mothering, and relationship issues. She is author of Listening When Parts Speak, a practical guide to healing with internal family systems therapy and ancestor wisdom, and Healing the Wounded Mother. She is also a contributor to Fiercely Speaking. If you enjoy this program, please like, subscribe, press the bell icon, and share. Tamala is a California native who travels internationally. Now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Tamala. It's a great pleasure to be with you on New Thinking Aloud today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here, Emmy.
Today we're going to discuss how you help people connect with their wise and well ancestors to heal generational trauma, wounds that they've experienced so that they can be more whole and complete people, particularly with this ancestral lineage healing. Can you share how you began helping people with this?
So it actually came out of doing my own ancestral healing work. Two things were happening. I was doing my own ancestral healing work and I was learning and being trained in IFS. And the more I learned about IFS and ancestral healing, I realized that there was some overlap and there was a way to bring the ancestors in to help with the healing that I was learning with internal family systems.
For those who are new to internal family systems, can you give us a brief overview or as much as you want to share about what that is?
Yes. So with internal family systems, we view the mind or the psyche as having subpersonalities. So having what we call parts. At one time, the mind or psyche was looked at as one whole. And anytime we thought there were parts or any type of division, the goal was integration and to bring all those parts into the one. Now we realize that having parts is the norm. That is how our mind is made up.
And that would be different than what some people might consider like schizophrenia, right?
Yes.
Or may include that as well?
I think one of the things that people often ask, it's funny that you say that, because one of the things people ask when they're in therapy is, does this mean I have multiple personality disorder or something like that? And it doesn't mean that. Because this is the norm, we also have extremes. So at the extreme would be the dissociation identity disorder is what would be at the extreme of these parts. But it is the normal way that our mind works, and it does not mean that we have some type of mental disorder.
So when we have these different parts of ourselves, we might feel one way and also another way, or is it that we have like kind of sub personas, or how would you describe that?
Oh, I love that. Feeling one way or another way would mean that we have two parts operating. Like, think about when you have to make a big decision in your life, whether or not I'm going to stay close to family or take this job that's going to take me away from family, meaning that I will no longer have the support of maybe grandparents with the children. And so there's parts of us who say, yes, let's stay close because of all the benefits of that and family connections. But then there are other parts that want to promote and be more, earn more money, have new experiences in this new town. So those would be the parts in making that decision, those that want to stay and those that say, no, let's go and experience something new. And so balancing those, we look at that as having a polarization within where parts are separated and have two different ways of viewing something.
So in IFS, you help a person communicate with those parts and see which one maybe speaks louder, or for example, when making that kind of decision?
Absolutely. What we want to do, Emmy, is hear from both parts. And sometimes we have what we call a coalition of parts, or there might be a group of parts that want to stay near family and another group of parts for various reasons that want to take the job. So what we want to do is just listen, have the person listen to both sides, because sometimes we find ourselves more listening to one side of our polarization, which then activates the other side. So we want to listen to both and to kind of take turns hearing and understanding why they hold the positions that they hold.
When people are listening to the parts of themselves, do the ancestors then speak with them?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Emmy. Yeah. Sometimes and sometimes not. It really depends on how connected someone is with their ancestors, whether or not we've done ancestral work in our sessions previously. So it just really depends on how much exposure the client has had to their ancestors and how much connection they have with them.
How do you then introduce this ancestral lineage healing with your clients?
I'm usually bringing the ancestors in when we're doing what we call legacy burden work. And a legacy burden is a burden that's been handed down through our ancestral line. So it's something that may have happened a long time ago or several generations ago, but yet it is a burden or trauma that the line experiences. So because it's connected to maybe people we don't even know, this is the perfect time to invite ancestors in to the healing work.
What is a burden according to internal family systems therapy?
Love that question. Let's give some definitions here, right? So when we experience some type of trauma or mishap or misalignment or misattunement with us when we're being raised, we come to believe things about ourselves. That trauma causes us to see ourselves differently. That's the burden. Whatever that shift is for us, that maybe I feel rejected or not good enough or unlovable, that's the burden.
I think a lot of people deal with burdens. I think a lot of people, doesn't it seem they're dealing with perhaps lack of self-worth or self-esteem or even self-acceptance or respect or love? And then that internal dialogue, sense of self then can be projected onto others. And I think we don't have to look very far to see how that's playing out in society and culture, right?
Absolutely. Yes. We all have burdens. Every last one of us. There is no perfect parenting. So there are things that are going to happen in our upbringing that's going to cause us to see ourselves differently, maybe even change the way we present and interact with others because of not being attuned to. So those are the things that then cause us to be burdened.
Can you share how this ancestral lineage healing of speaking with your own ancestors helped you personally in your life?
When I first was doing ancestral lineage healing, I was working with my mother's line and just really wanting to understand the gifts of that line and also any way that that line could help me in my current life at that time, which was maybe like 5, 6 years ago now. And what they did is they brought to me some meditations that show up in my book, Listening When Parts Speak. So those meditations in that book, actually 9 out of the 12 meditations were gifted to me from the ancestors on my mother's line. So one of the things that showed me is how much our ancestors care about our lives right now, today.
Are you comfortable sharing what your burden or burdens were and how they assisted you?
Yeah. So some of the burdens that I was living with is a burden of feeling rejected. And I think that came from multiple ways. One, I have a father that he really pushed us to excellence. And so anything that I did that fell below, and really excellence, I'm really probably leaning towards perfection, but anything that fell beneath that, I felt like I didn't measure up. So if I got a C in school or didn't do well at a track meet and, he's pushing me to do harder, that felt like rejection because it was like what I was doing wasn't enough. So one of my burdens was absolutely rejection. And I think that was then I experienced it again or heightened when my parents divorced, because that also felt like a rejection. So when they were together, it was kind of that perfection to live up to. And then when they divorced, that also felt like another rejection. So that is the burden that I was living with.
Yeah, those sometimes overt and subtle ways that parents interact with us when we're growing up can have really deep, profound impacts on our psyches throughout our lives.
Absolutely. Yes. And and perfection in and of itself is a burden. I mean, because so it's a burden and a gift in a sense, because I heard a part of me is like, was it all burden? The gift of perfection, so to speak, it's what helped me succeed in life because I was always pushing for the next goal. But the burden is it truly burned me out. That you're always pushing, you're always looking for the next goal. So, and you can't attain perfection. That's the other thing. So in wanting to attain perfection, there sometimes was procrastination, not wanting to do anything if it wasn't going to be perfect.
Right. So that fear can become really strong.
Absolutely. Yes.
How did your mother's line help you heal that burden?
What we found is that there were other women on this line that were pushing for perfection, that also felt a sense of rejection. So by inviting in what we call a well and wise ancestor into the healing process, that ancestor was able to take that burden from all of us and give us some what we call heirlooms or gifts from the ancestral line. So, and one of the gifts that I received was a gift of confidence, a gift of accepting myself for who I am, a gift of not apologizing for who I am and showing up fully. So lots of gifts came from releasing that burden of rejection.
Yeah. How was it decided to work with your mother's line? Some might be thinking, well, maybe you go to the father or the father's father line to see where maybe he was rejected and that's why he really wanted his children to do so well.
Yeah. So in ancestral healing, what we do is there's a method in which we rank our 4 main lines. And like you were saying, you got your father's mother, mother's mother, and mother's father. And it is advised that we start with the healthiest line. So after that ranking, my mother's line showed to be the healthiest line. And the reason they say that is because when you're first getting into working with your ancestors, we want to work with the line that would be the easiest to work with. So the healthier the line is, the easier it is to interact with those ancestors. There may need to be more protection around working with lines that aren't as healthy or that might be darker for whatever reason. So we want to kind of get some traction working with those healthier lines first.
How long did it take you and how long does it typically take your clients to heal from these burdens using the gifts from their ancestors?
It can be fairly quickly and it can be fairly long.
Yeah. It depends, right?
Right. It depends. And how it can be longer is because the person has experienced more challenges, more burdens, more trauma. So the deeper the trauma, the more protected the system is. And the system has to trust me, the client, and the process. So a more protected system is going to take longer to have buy-in and trust. So that's why it takes longer. But if a person hasn't experienced as many traumas, their system may trust me, the process, and the client at a deeper level sooner. And so we can get right to that healing.
On New Thinking Aloud, we deal with topics related to what we're talking about today, spirituality and parapsychology, psychic functioning, telepathy, after-death communication, near-death experiences, and so forth. Would you consider this a form of after-death communication or like mediumship or channeling, or does it not matter whether this is something, quote, real for the person or not? They're just still getting results. How do you look at this process?
I love that question about a person getting results, whether it's real or not, because often what I'll hear are things like, I don't know my ancestors. I've had no connection with them. I don't even believe that I can talk to or connect with my ancestors. Another one, I don't think I have a well ancestor. We have generations upon generations of dysfunction. And so many reasons for people not to believe this. But what I know for sure, Emmy, is our ancestors are real. They will show up when we ask them to. They love us and they want to help. So I just say to the person, let's just try it. Let's just see what happens. If this isn't a fit for you, there's many other ways that we can heal and we can use some other method. I also do believe that this is after death communication, that our ancestors have passed on and they have gems of wisdom that they want to make sure stay alive in our ancestral lines through us.
I love that you consider it a form of after-death communication, because there is apparently many anecdotal experiences of people having veridical, for example, near-death experiences, and also after-death communication. Has that happened to you or your clients where they received information that they would have otherwise not have known? For example, that maybe there was something that the person took seemingly to their grave, but then some information came out, not only for their healing, but any other content that you found really compelling or they did.
Some of the things that folks have shared have been information about their relationship, say a difficult relationship with a parent. And by having the connection with ancestors, they are given some information that helps them to understand the difficulty that they're having in the relationship with their parent. I also had a client who had some medical stuff going on and received some information from an ancestor that asked them to tell the doctor to check this. It was a kidney. Doctor checked the kidney, and that ended up being the issue when the person had been going through all of these medical tests and treatments and not getting any relief until they received that ancestral message of check your kidney.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you share any stories of your clients when they've connected to their ancestors and how it helped them in their lives?
One of the things that I hear over and over, this is a broad response, but one of the things I hear over and over is that people feel more connected and grounded, not only to their ancestors, but to their family members, that are alive right now today. There's something about having that connection to the past that helps us ground in our current relationships and have a deeper understanding of maybe problems that have existed in the relationship, how important and valuable this relationship is, and a deepening of their love for their family members.
I've learned of a term called continuing bonds from people like Janice Miner Holden, who is the current president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, who has been studying near-death experiences and transpersonal phenomena for many years alongside people like Bruce Grayson. And I also heard about this term from William Peters, who talks about shared crossing experiences that people have when their loved one passes, that the living person can experience what the dying person seemingly is also experiencing. And so it sounds like what you're doing with this is helping them with these continued bonds.
Absolutely. People want to feel connected. People are also asking for answers. Like, I have this particular burden. It doesn't really make sense to me, but I can't stop doing what I'm doing. Like a burden, again, like around perfectionism. I could not stop. But because it has a long history in our generational field, this is why it's so hard to break some of these burdens and behaviors.
There may be some people listening thinking, well, where do I begin? There's messy relationships on this side of the family and messy relationships on this side of the family. Is this something a person can delve into on their own? Are there maybe reading your book, or is this something they really need to work with a trained practitioner to get the results?
Working with their own parts and their own personal burdens. Let me make this distinction. A personal burden is a burden that we have from our lived experience, right? So when I was talking about how I felt rejection because my dad wanted me to be better than a C student, that was a personal experience. So that burden came from my personal experience. When we speak about legacy burdens, those are the burdens that are not from our personal experience. They're handed down through our ancestral line. And a burden can be both. It can have an aspect of personal and an aspect of legacy. So what I would say about doing your own work is, with the book Listening When Parts Speak, you absolutely can do your own work on your personal burdens. But when we get to the legacy burden piece, that's more complicated. And it often, you can do some of that work on your own. But this is often where people will get stuck. And so you may need to reach out to a professional if you get stuck in that process. And I do offer in the resource section various professionals they can reach out to if they need additional help with any part of the work.
Does it take a bit of finessing to determine what is a person's own burden versus through the legacy? Because I can also see where it could kind of get really mixed in and murky, because the parent is also bringing their experience from their parents and grandparents and all the way back to the table when they're parenting.
When I'm working with people, they are really clear about what their personal stuff is. Like they'll have the lived experience, the memories of when something happened, where they know where a shift happened for themselves. Yeah. So where they're less clear though, Emmy, is what part of this is legacy. Like, is this a legacy burden? Because some of the things we've been doing for so long that we don't realize it's actually been handed down, right?
Yeah. For example, we might feel like we're not confident enough when we perhaps participated in some interview for a job. And maybe that could be part of our own individual selves, but maybe it really did and does stem from something in the legacy.
Yes. And when I'm helping someone make that distinction, I'm curious about, how long have you felt this way? And when I get an answer like, I've always felt this way, I can't think of a time when I didn't behave this way, I start to think legacy. Or when people say things like, my mom, my grandmother, all the women in my family are self-reliant and they don't want support from men. They do things themselves. I'm like, sounds like a legacy burden, right? Something that's been handed down. So there are clues that I'm listening for to help me determine if all or part of what the person is experiencing is connected to legacy.
We're learning that time and space isn't really what we have been taught it is, this linear fashion. And I'm curious, in your experience with working with ancestral lineage healing and with IFS, how much you have noticed or feel this, not only can it help with future generations, but helps previous generations heal as well.
Man, you're asking some great questions. Oh, that's one of my favorite, Emmy, about the healing. Yes, the healing going both ways. So when someone living today decides to do ancestral healing, they are healing themselves. They're healing the folks that came before them that carried this same burden. That's why we invite in that wise ancestor. And when we invite in the ancestor, we're saying who on this ancestral line can and wants to. So it has the ability and desire to help unburden this legacy burden. And that person steps forward. We also are healing future generations because there now is a shift in this generational line. So I'm not passing on the perfection to my children if I've healed it within myself. So and even if that healing, this is important, even if that healing comes after raising our children, because now we can interact with them very differently than we had interacted with them previously, owning what part of, what interactions we've had with them that we wish we would have done differently. But now we can interact with them very differently from our healing point forward.
How far back in the lineage does one need to go to heal, right? Because there are multiple generations. And so what have you discovered with that?
Yeah. One of the things I love about IFS is I don't have to know. It is an invitation to every woman on my mother's line who has experienced being the self-reliant, I have to do it myself, strong Black woman say. So those women will step forward on their own. They know that they carry this burden. And so however far back, when I did that particular healing on my mother's line, Emmy, the line of women that I could see felt endless. It really did. So I wouldn't be able to even know how far it went back. And the way that they showed themselves is that they circled around me. So there's a circle around me, and then it went out radiated from just women in this circle around me that just went out as far as the eye could see and further.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
It was beautiful.
Is this done in an inner relaxed focused state, or how are you guiding people to connect to their wise and well ancestors?
So this is great because this reminded me to share this part of the healing with the audience, is that how I'm guiding them is we're asking a person to be in what we call self-energy in IFS. And self-energy happens when we can be separate from any of our parts, and there's qualities of self-energy. So those qualities all begin with C, but there's, compassion, curiosity, confidence, creativity. So we want the person to interact and connect with their ancestors from their highest self. So that's another way to think about self-energy, from whatever your highest self is. So, and I have them go inside, and you could call it meditative, but really what we want them to do is to be able to connect inside with themselves in self energy, which then allows them to connect with their ancestors.
The self may be equivalent to, as you said, the higher self, the soul, the spirit, the oneness, the all, what some might consider God, or that kind of higher loving consciousness, right?
Absolutely. All of the above.
Yeah. And that's really where a lot of the, if not all, the healing energy comes from.
Mm-hmm. It does. Absolutely.
Okay, beautiful.
One of the things too that I enjoy about doing this work is people learn how to tap into their own healing resource. So I'm guiding, I'm supporting, I'm holding, but they are connecting to their own healing resource and then using that resource to help them connect to the healing energy of their ancestral lines.
You brought up the strong Black woman legacy burden. Is that right?
Yes,
Can you share a little
yes.
bit more about that?
Yeah. So many Black women have this particular legacy burden, and it is a legacy burden of self-reliance. It also causes them to put others, many others, above themselves, their needs, and then they are not taking care of maybe their health, their mental health, their physical health, in exchange for being seen as indispensable, always there for others. And what I see then are women who are very burnt out. Like, I cannot continue to do this, yet I can't stop either. And so and that's one of those burdens that usually has both a legacy and a personal component. So there are things in this woman's personal and lived experience that has caused this burden to materialize and develop. And there is what's been handed down through the ancestral line of many Black women who've also felt that they had to be self-reliant. They could not depend on anybody else. If they didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. These are the things that women will say to me as a result of having this burden.
That's an area of your focus, right? People who are Black, Indigenous, people of color?
It is, yes, and particularly women.
There are also cultural legacy burdens as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I'm most familiar with the U.S. cultural burden, since this is the culture that I have been raised in. And so, however, all cultures have cultural legacy burdens. As I've interacted with women from various different cultures, they've shared with some of the legacy burdens that are cultural within their society too. But for U.S., we're looking at racism as a cultural burden, patriarchy, materialism, and individualism. These are all burdens that come from our culture. And the interesting thing about, say, individualism and how it also plays into the strong Black woman legacy burden. I can do it myself. I'm of value if I can pull myself up and do everything on my own. Patriarchy and racism also plays into the strong Black woman legacy burden. So that just deepens the burden exponentially, makes it harder to carry when it's not just personal, it's not just generational, it's also racial, individualism, maybe even the materialism. I could see that playing into it when I'm wanting to achieve things beyond where I am right now, right? So it's compounded by the cultural burden also. And all burdens can be impacted by the cultural burden also.
We're really seeing racial and socioeconomic divisions here in the United States even more strongly than ever. I would say that it even seems like pre-civil rights era in a certain way. And I'm just curious if you have any suggestions how we can help heal these legacy burdens in the United States.
Wow, that is a really big question. It is. It's big. It's heavy. It's timely. It's what we're living through right now. And what I've been saying to my clients that are carrying some of this is doing their own work, finding community that can support them. This is not something to be doing alone. Some of the things that I'm doing in order to create community is bringing Black women together on retreat in order to heal generational trauma and cultural burdens. And healing in community is the most effective way to heal. So that's what I'm asking folks to do, is find your people, not to do this alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the burdens, correct me if I'm wrong, with the strong Black woman or Black people in general, is really slavery. And of course, we can do our own inner work and connect with like-minded people in community. Are there any other suggestions that you have on how we can heal Not only that, but also even going back to Native Americans and what happened with those people.
Yeah.
Or would you suggest that everyone just needs to find their own path with that?
I think they do. I think it's really important to be intentional in two ways. One, intentional about what your own healing path looks like, how you want to do that. You know, some people are choosing therapy. Some people will choose a self-help path. Some people will choose some type of support with other people, like some type of group support, but also how you want to show up in the world given all the challenges we're living through right now. You know, like I'm choosing to show up in the world as a support and healer to others. You know, that I can't fix necessarily what's broken by myself, but I certainly can reach out to folks who want to be supported.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of saying that. And for people perhaps to take action internally or externally in any way that they see is perhaps the most helpful or beneficial for themselves and others.
Absolutely.
Can you give an example of who would be a wise and well ancestor? What kind of attributes or characteristics would they have?
The wise and well ancestor can be an ancestor who at one time had the same burden that we're asking them to come in and help release. But at some point, this person has become well and healed from that burden, and they are committed and want to help others on the line with the same or similar burdens. They're loving, they're wise, they're willing, they want to support, they're intuitive. I love the intuition. Oh my goodness. Yes, they're intuitive and they just offer a lot of hope to us. And they also, the other thing that I love about the wise ancestor, in their wisdom, they know exactly how to release this burden from this ancestral line, and they know the exact gifts we need moving forward. And they offer those gifts in great generosity.
You mention in your book that the book you wrote, Listening When Parts Speak, is actually a gift from your ancestors.
It is. I did not sit down and say, oh, I'm going to write this book. You know, that is not how this happened. I was gifted with the meditations, a meditation first, and the meditation is the one in chapter 11 on legacy burdens. That's the first gift that they gave me. And they told me, because I did that for a healing summit, I was called to, do a meditation for this summit. That was the meditation my ancestors gave me. And they said, this meditation will be one in a book that you will write of additional meditations for helping people heal with internal family system. And I was like, okay. And they were very clear. They said, when you do this summit, you can let people know a book is coming. I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to do this. I know nothing about a book coming, but okay. And do not have this meditation recorded or in written form. The only way until this book is written that you can deliver this meditation is orally in any future meditations. And I believed them. And thank goodness I did. And they continued to guide me and gift me with the additional 9 meditations through this process. And they were always present. I called them, well, they called themselves my writing clan. And there are times in my writing that they would just stand behind me and literally, Emmy, I could just remember them like they would point onto the computer like, no, that's not quite right. Change that. Maybe try saying it like this. I mean, they really carried me through this whole process. And so that's why I say that this was absolutely a collaboration with the women on my mother's line. And that's who I dedicated the book to.
You're talking with your ancestors not only in a meditative state, but also while you're engaging in activities.
I do. Absolutely. Yes. There's times where I'll just stop and just ask them, what do you think about this? Do you think I should move forward? Like I might be in the middle of some type of conference or speaking with someone about some decisions we're going to make or things that I might want to do in my business. Should I collaborate with this person or not? What are you thinking? So I'll just pause and just listen for their answers. Yeah.
they become perhaps a form of a guide, a spirit guide.
My ancestors are definitely spirit guides.
I did one of your meditations in your great book about going to a cabin in the woods. Yeah. And in your meditation, I believe you just said walk on a path and you come upon this cabin and you go in there and you notice who's in there. And it was my father with his father and his uncle. And it was very healing. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. It's just amazing who shows up. And that's the first meditation they gave me.
I wondered if that's what it was.
That's the first one. And over and over and over again, Emmy, the feedback I get about that meditation from all over the world is it was the most powerful, moving meditation that people have engaged in, and that they connected with the ancestors and had no expectation that they would, and the healing that came from those connections. So I'm always moved by the sharing about that meditation.
It's certainly bringing up emotions for me even talking about it now. It was very loving and joyful to be with all of them, and not surprising, it wasn't always like that with all of them in their relationship and even with me. So to have that experience with them was very healing.
And that's something that I hear too. Thank you for sharing that, is that the relationship that folks are reporting that they're having with their ancestors, even some that are, father, grandfather, closely connected is what I'm trying to say, is different from what they experienced when they were living. And that also has contributed to the healing that they got in that reconnection with their passed on ancestors.
I only met my paternal grandfather one time because my father didn't speak to him for much of his life. And so to see all of them together and to have that connection definitely helped me feel more whole and complete.
Yeah. And see, the other thing, like I was talking about the healing once people pass on, the fact that they came together, they're also giving you a message that they have healed. They've healed whatever was broken between them.
Yeah, they were very encouraging and loving and quite supportive of what I'm doing. And that meant a lot as well.
I'm so glad you got that gift. I really am. Yeah.
And so that was the first meditation you received.
Yeah.
I hope others get a chance to participate in that and see what comes up either on their own or with a professional like yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, Tamala, this has been a really powerful, joyful, and loving conversation. Is there anything else you want to share today about talking with your wise and well ancestors?
I just want to invite people to be curious about the messages that their ancestors hold for them. This is a time where we really need the wisdom of our ancestors. So in whatever ways in which you can connect and bring in the gifts of your ancestral line into your living, I encourage you to do that.
That is a much needed invitation right now. So thank you for that, Tamala, for people to, in whatever way, speaks to them, receive the support they need so that we can all move forward in more kind and loving ways that enhances our own lives personally and our relationships with others, our society, culture, and the whole world.
Thank you so much, Emmy.
Yeah. Thank you, Tamala. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us because you are the reason that we are here.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. the topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.